Michaela struggled with insulin resistance, hypothyroidism, and PCOS, former PCOS, before working with me, which made it super difficult for her to lose weight and increase her energy levels. So today I will walk you through her story, working with me, what she struggled with before, where she was coming from, and what made it click for her in 5 parts. And before we dive in it, a bit of context about what her situation actually looked like. So the main issue in our first conversation that she pointed out was that she was collapsing on the sofa by 5 p.m. As in, she would come home from work and couldn't do anything anymore. Nothing social anymore, couldn't do anything at home anymore because she was just so tired and had to sleep on the sofa, which of course made her really annoyed about the situation. Now, also, she wasn't lazy, so in spite of that, she was still doing her workouts, right? She was still doing strength training, she was still doing cardio, she was still active throughout the day and also watching her food. Her stress was quite high because of her starting a new job and had quite a busy lifestyle. Now, these 3 conditions that I mentioned before already made it super difficult for her to get a hold of that, lose the weight and increase the energy, which was again the PCOS, insulin resistance, and hypothyroidism. Now, part 1 of what I want to walk you through is why the standard advice was failing her. And if we look at these 3 conditions, then one of them is the insulin resistance. The thing is that all the standard advice that we get out there around fitness, which is that you should be in a calorie deficit, you should eat less, you should track your food, be in a calorie deficit, and do your 3-4 strength training sessions, do cardio ideally, so work out like 4 or 5 times a week. The thing is that all of these things are also stressors to the body, and stressors, no, these are not bad. It's something positive. Our bodies adapt if we give them stressors. But if you are suffering from insulin resistance, hypothyroidism, so your thyroid is a bit slower than it should be ideally, at the same time you have a stressful job, then these stressors of just eating less and training more very quickly can get too much, which means specifically that it has the tendency to worsen insulin resistance, because we know the more cortisol there is in your system, the more stress you have, the more resistant towards insulin your cells get. That's the insulin resistance. So what I'm saying is that just cutting her food and training more on top of her stressful life, that conditions that she's going through can make that worse. So that's the reason. And that could be one of the reasons that the things she tried before, which is eating less and working out more, haven't worked for her. Okay, so it would just add more stress on an already stressed system. Also, we know that these stressors are slowing can slow down your thyroid even more. So when you're very stressed and you have a lot of cortisol, you have high cortisol levels, that is what reduces the conversion of the thyroid hormone T4 to T3. And that's the active thyroid hormone, meaning it can lead to you burning fewer calories throughout the day and therefore having a quote-unquote slower metabolism. So that's why the standard advice, so that could be one of the reasons the standard advice hasn't really worked for her, and why we chose the opposite route, because of these physiological mechanisms that are happening, or that could have happened for her as well. So what really changed for her specifically is that we started with the energy. So instead of just focusing on, okay, what do we do now with the calories to make sure that you're just losing weight as quickly as possible, we were focusing on a food structure throughout the day, like what she's eating, how much, making it pragmatic in her day-to-day, that allowed her to have energy, right? To allowed her to increase her energy levels. So for example, a breakfast that kept her full till lunch, where she's actually, and she actually told me, like after the first week already, hey, she's like satiated to lunch and she's full, doesn't feel like craving anymore, which she had before, right? She was snacking throughout the day, like before noon, afternoon, which is fine, but if it's uncontrolled because you're not eating enough or you're not eating the right things, that's of course not the idea. So just giving her a food structure that allowed her to stay full throughout the day and avoid like uncontrolled morning or afternoon snacking. Also, we switched many of the cardio sessions to strength sessions, and for the first time, she actually learned how to properly, we could call it load her body, as in how to properly challenge her body, as in not too much and not too little. How much she should go to her limit when to increase the weights, and these kind of things that allow her to build more muscle, improve her metabolic rate, and therefore make sure she has an easier time losing weight, but without stressing her too much and without giving, again, like feeding that insulin resistance cycle of things like increase of stress that then worsen the insulin resistance. So that's really what we focused on, making sure that she has high energy throughout the day by giving her foods that are shown to help with stable blood sugar levels. But then also making sure that with the training, she's approaching it in a way where it doesn't overload her and where she's actually able to manage intensities properly. So that's what we did. And at the same time, also because she's very active socially, introduced some rules of thumb when it comes to drinking wine, because she, with the Danish work culture that she was in, there was also a lot of having wine after work a couple times a week, and then we just gave her simple rules of thumb about how much wine to have throughout the week, so we're not limiting it, but at the same time she has simple rules of thumb, so she knows from when on it would worsen the results too much or would impact the results too much. So we made that easy and pragmatic for her with these rules of thumb. Now, the results that she got from implementing that structure, introducing proper stress management, and also management of the workouts, of the intensities, is that she got her energy back first, right? That's the first thing she mentioned already after a couple of weeks. First of all, it was less urges to snack, higher mental focus, less brain fog, more clarity. And then the afternoon dip got less and less. And after a couple of weeks, I think 2 months it was, the midday, the 5 p.m. dip, right? On the couch that I mentioned, disappeared altogether. So that was really the first thing. Then she lost on the scale 5 kilograms, and since she was quite consistent, as I mentioned, she's quite ambitious with working out 3 times a week and doing strength training 3 times a week. That means actually, since she also gained some muscle, she even lost more than that in body fat. So just on the scale, it was these 5 kilograms of body weight that she lost as the second result. She also used a different belt notch. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but she had to punch a new hole on the belt. She used a different hole on her belt, and was also really positive. After even 20 weeks, 4 or 5 months, her parents visited her. The first thing they said, "Hey, you look like you lost weight." So that was the results that she got from just approaching it that way. And because we're very big on improving her energy levels first, everything when it comes to counting her calories and macronutrients that she did on that end was having 1 week in between where we did something like a food study, right? Since she's having a very social life, means she's eating out, having snacks or having wine here and there. Had her track for a week, her food intake. That was the only thing that we did when it comes to calorie counting, so that we, based on that, could fine-tune her structure throughout the day a bit more. But it didn't rely on her weighing the food all the time in these 4 to 5 months that I just mentioned. It didn't rely on her counting all her calories throughout that timeline, but literally just one time doing a food study, and the rest was just giving her the right structure and making sure her body can cope with these stressors that I mentioned daily, the stress from work, from the training, and from these conditions that she was suffering from properly. So that's what we did, and that's the results that she got from that. And for the first time, she really knew how to do it in a sustainable way without actually forcing herself, right? So getting more results by doing less. And one really interesting revelation that she had is that on one weekend, because again, had a very social life, she had pancakes and all kinds of stuff. So she was really eating off plan throughout the day, all kinds of things. And she mentioned, hey, that day and the days, the 1 to 2 days afterwards, she really felt super bad in terms of her energy and digestion and these kind of things, which didn't affect her progress, right? She still kept progressing and having high energy after that, but just to show 1 day off the plan and how she would maybe have a weekend before, showed her how bad her energy actually was before compared to doing it properly. And that's really the difference. That's what I like to see personally as a coach. I love to see that the most, because that's when you understand the way you ate, and it wasn't really like super bad or anything. It just didn't follow the structure that we outlined for her. When you're at a point where you like change up your structure, you increase your energy, you lose weight, and then you're eating one Saturday, for example, the way you ate before, and then you see what you actually did to your body all that time without the proper food structure. And we were like really talking about, imagine doing that for the rest of her life, just eating like that. And that was just one day, right? When she worked with me, everything was in place. One day of eating differently on a Saturday, and then she realized how big that actual change is when you take proper care of that routine. Now, in the end of the day, what I want to communicate with her journey is that, right, is that discipline versus structure topic. For her, since she was already watching her food and already working out, the structure was the missing piece. Because if I had her just count her calories and reduce that, that would just not just a mental stressor, but that would be putting more stress on her already stressed body. So what we did also with that week of tracking, where we had the numbers specifically, we had her in like a minimal deficit, if anything, but just eating less and doing like 1,600 or even 700 calories over a given time would have her being likely to stress long term, because we know that a severe deficit over time leads to increase in cortisol levels, and therefore can make things like hypothyroidism or insulin resistance symptoms even worse. So what we focused on is establishing a structure, making sure that we even took some pressure out of the training, right? Reduced the intensities, shortened the strength training. And that's really like what was the key for her, as opposed to just being more strict. We made it pragmatic, and we established a structure, and that's it essentially. So she now signed on for another round, another year of tackling the next goal, which is losing another 10 kilograms. That will be the next step in her journey, and making sure she can stabilize her energy, make the whole thing sustainable, especially with a proper support system during summer, which socially is, right, like a super active time. And that's essentially it. So remember, it's not always just discipline that's necessary, but a lot of times it's really the structure next to that consistency. Hope you could just learn or take away anything from this episode. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to the next one.